Just when you think you've finally mapped out the wreckage of Hollywood's most toxic marriage, a new player enters the chat with a flamethrower. We've all seen the eye rolls. We've all heard the entanglement excuses. We've even watched the man who gave us the Fresh Prince turn into a shell of a human being on global television. But while the world was busy blaming Will Smith's temper, they missed the silent architect behind the madness. For years, the industry whispered. For years, the elite stayed silent. Why? Because in Hollywood, you don't poke the bear unless you're ready to get eaten alive. But guess what? Vivica A. Fox is officially done being scared. She's stepping out of the shadows to reveal a truth so cold, so calculated, and so parasitic that it makes Jada's red table look like a nursery school. We aren't just talking about a bad marriage anymore. We're talking about a slow-motion public execution of a man's soul. Vivica is pulling back the curtain on the worthy illusion, and what's underneath is enough to make your blood run cold. Is Jada Pinkett Smith a healer? Or is she the most dangerous manipulator to ever walk a red carpet? Buckle up, because the truth Vivica just dropped. It changes everything. You think you know Jada Pinkett Smith because you saw her in a few movies or watched her sit at a mahogany table and talk about her feelings. But that is exactly what she wants you to think. The reality is that the industry has been shielding this woman for decades while she systematically dismantled one of the greatest legacies in entertainment history. We are talking about the total and complete emasculation of Will Smith, a man who went from being the most likable guy on the planet to a public outcast. And it did not happen by accident. It was a calculated, cold-blooded strategy designed to keep Jada in the headlines, no matter who she had to crush to get there. Now, the reason Vivica Fox is finally blowing the whistle is because she saw the pattern. She saw the same behavior that destroyed the peace of mind of stars across the board, from the messy divorces of Atlanta royalty like Candy Burruss to the high-stakes secrets being kept behind the closed doors of Nicole Kidman's mansion. Vivica is pointing out that Jada does not just have a marriage problem. She has a power problem. She has spent her entire life trying to prove she is smarter, tougher, and more enlightened than everyone else. But the only thing she has proven is that she is a master of the false narrative. The scandal begins with the fact that Jada Pinkett Smith has been living a double life for much longer than the 6 years she admitted to in her book. Leaked reports from within the Smith household paint a picture of a woman who was never satisfied with being a wife or a partner. She wanted to be a martyr. She created a toxic environment where Will was forced to apologize for his success while she explored what she called her spiritual growth in the arms of much younger men. This was not about love or finding herself. This was about dominance. Think about the sheer audacity it takes to bring your husband onto your own show, look him in the eye while he is visibly trembling with heartbreak, and force him to agree that your affair was just an entanglement. That is not healing. That is psychological torture performed for the sake of Facebook watch ratings. Vivica Fox saw this, and she saw it for exactly what it was, a public shaming of a black man who had spent 30 years building a brand of excellence. But why did nobody say anything until now? Because Jada had everyone convinced that she was the victim. She used her struggles with alopecia and her childhood trauma as a shield. Every time someone tried to hold her accountable for her blatant disrespect of her marriage, she would pivot back to her own pain. It is a classic move from the manipulator's playbook. She convinced Will that he was the problem, that his need for a traditional marriage was a sign of his own insecurity. She gaslit one of the most powerful men in Hollywood into believing that her infidelity was actually his opportunity to grow. And while Will was busy growing into a shell of himself, Jada was busy expanding her empire of narcissism. Vivica Fox is revealing that the industry insiders knew Jada was the one pulling the strings behind the 2016 Oscar boycott, not out of a sense of justice, but because she was furious that Will was not nominated for Concussion. She used a global movement for diversity as a personal tantrum, and she forced Will to be the face of it. This is the woman who spent years mocking Will's manhood in private while demanding he defend her in public. We are talking about a woman who reportedly spent millions of dollars on spiritual retreats and advisors who told her exactly what she wanted to hear, that she was a queen and everyone else was beneath her. Sources close to the production of Red Table Talk have leaked information suggesting that the entire show was scripted to make Jada look like the wise sage while making her guests and her family look like they were in desperate need of her guidance. It was a factory of fake enlightenment. And the most disgusting part is how she used her children as props in this game. She brought them into the middle of her marital mess, forcing them to take sides in a war that she started. Vivica Fox's truth goes even deeper into the financial corruption of the Smith brand. There are whispers of massive legal fees spent to keep former staff silent about the screaming matches and the cold, calculated way Jada would treat the people who worked for her. While she was on camera talking about love and light, she was allegedly running her household like a military dictator, demanding total loyalty while giving none in return. The world saw the slap at the Oscars and thought it was about Chris Rock. But the truth, according to this new wave of information, is that the slap was the sound of a man finally snapping under the weight of a decade of abuse. He did not slap Chris Rock for Jada. He slapped the world because he could not slap the person who was actually destroying him. And where was Jada when the fallout hit? She was not standing by her man. She was not taking responsibility for the toxic atmosphere she created. Instead, she sat in the audience and laughed. She watched her husband's career go up in flames, watched him get banned from the academy, watched him lose millions in deals, and she did absolutely nothing. In fact, she did worse than nothing. She went on her podcast and told the world that she never asked him to do that. She threw him under the bus before the engine was even cool. This is the truth that Vivica Fox is putting on the table. She is exposing the fact that Jada Pinkett Smith is not a woman who loves Will Smith. She is a woman who loves the power she has over Will Smith. The investigative findings show that Jada's habit of dropping bombshells is always timed perfectly with her financial needs. When her book sales were projected to be low, suddenly she reveals they have been separated since 2016. When her show needs a boost, suddenly she's talking about her past addictions. She is a vulture feeding on the carcass of her own marriage. Hollywood elites like Anna Navarro and Stephen A. Smith have already started to turn the tide, calling her out for being a marketing genius at the expense of her husband's sanity. But Vivica is the one who is taking it to the personal level. She is talking about the lack of human decency it takes to emasculate the father of your children for the entire world to see. Think about the psychological impact of being Will Smith. You are a global icon, but at home, you are told you are not enough. You are told that your wife needs other men to feel good. You are told that your career is a distraction from her growth. It is a slow poison. And while people like Michael B. Jordan were smart enough to see the red flags and get out, Will was already too deep. He was trapped in the fantasy that if he just gave a little more, if he just sacrificed a little more of his pride, Jada would finally be satisfied. But as Vivica Fox is revealing, Jada can never be satisfied because her happiness is not the goal. Control is the goal. The corruption within this dynamic is so deep that it has infected the way we view celebrity relationships. Jada has made it okay to publicly humiliate your spouse under the guise of being real. She has turned toxic behavior into a brand. But the reports are coming in that the public is tired of the act. The financial crisis within the Smith empire is starting to show, with major projects being shelved and the brand of the once golden couple becoming radioactive. This is the beginning of the end for the illusion of the perfect Hollywood power couple. Jada's refusal to stand by her husband or admit her part in this mess has finally backfired. The world is looking at her not as a leader of thought, but as a person who played a dangerous game with a man's life and lost. Vivica Fox is pointing out that if this were any other man, if this were any other marriage, the world would have called for an intervention years ago. But because it was the Smiths, everyone looked the other way. They ignored the leaked stories of Jada's demands and her icy demeanor. They ignored the way Will's eyes changed over the years, losing that spark of joy that made him a star. They ignored the fact that Jada was using his platform to promote her own ego while burning his reputation to the ground. But the silence is over. The investigation into the truth of Jada Pinkett Smith is just starting to reveal the massive scale of the deception. She proved she only cares about herself when she told the world she just wanted it to end. She wanted the marriage to end, she wanted the charade to end, but she wanted to keep the money and the status. She wanted to live a separate life while Will paid the bills and took the blame. It is a level of selfishness that is hard for a normal person to even comprehend. And yet, she stands there in her expensive gowns, talking about her spiritual journey. Vivica Fox is calling for an end to the lies. She is calling for the world to see Jada for who she really is, the woman who broke the Fresh Prince and didn't feel a single bit of regret about it. And as we move into the actual breakdown of how this fallout is destroying their remaining influence, you will see that the consequences are only just beginning to catch up with her. The fallout of Jada's calculated behavior goes far beyond the walls of her mansion or the set of her cancelled Facebook show. When you look at the sheer scale of the psychological damage, you have to realize that Jada didn't just hurt Will. She created a blueprint for how to destroy a man's reputation while making yourself look like a saint. Vivica Fox is leaning into this truth because she knows that in the entertainment industry, reputation is the only currency that matters. And Jada spent Will's currency like it was her own. While Will was out there doing the heavy lifting, starring in blockbusters and maintaining a squeaky clean image that fueled their lifestyle, Jada was behind the scenes chipping away at his foundation. Investigative findings from former associates suggest that Jada was often jealous of Will's universal appeal. She couldn't stand that he was the beloved hero while she was often seen as the supporting act. So, what do you do when you can't rise to someone's level? You pull them down to yours. This brings us to the leaked reports regarding the internal mechanics of the Smith empire. Anonymous sources who worked within their production company, Westbrook Incorporated, have described an atmosphere of intense tension where everyone was forced to walk on eggshells around Jada. While Will was the face of the company, Jada was allegedly the one making the demands that often put their business interests at risk. There are stories of Jada demanding that certain projects be centered around her philosophies or her personal brand of healing, even when it made no financial sense. She was using the company's resources to build a cult of personality. When employees questioned her direction, they were reportedly met with the same cold, detached stare that Will saw at the red table. The corruption wasn't just emotional, it was professional. She was willing to gamble with the livelihoods of hundreds of employees just to ensure her voice was the loudest in the room. And then there is the matter of the secret financial drain. While the public sees the glamorous red carpet appearances, the reality of their finances in early 2026 is becoming a hot topic in investigative circles. Reports indicate that the massive legal and PR machinery required to keep Jada's image intact has cost the couple tens of millions of dollars. From non-disclosure agreements with former friends and staff to the high-priced crisis management teams hired after the Oscars, the Jada brand has become an expensive liability. Vivica Fox is hinting at the fact that Jada's sudden surge in honesty, the book, the podcasts, the interviews, is nothing more than a desperate cash grab. She realizes that the Will Smith bank account is no longer the bottomless pit it once was because his earning power has been severely hampered by the very scandal she helped ignite. She is cashing out on the destruction of her own marriage because she knows the ship is sinking. But let's talk about the public reaction that Jada refuses to acknowledge. Across social media, from the sports world to the fashion industry, the tide has turned. The humor has become darker, and the memes have turned into genuine critiques of her character. When 50 Cent posts about not wanting a relationship like theirs, it isn't just a joke, it's a reflection of a societal shift. Men and women alike are looking at Jada and seeing a warning sign. They see a woman who uses the language of therapy, words like boundaries, growth, and self-actualization, as tools of manipulation. She has weaponized the concept of mental health to justify her own selfish actions. Vivica Fox pointed out that Jada's self-righteousness is her most dangerous trait because it allows her to hurt people while genuinely believing she is the one being wronged. The consequences are now manifesting in ways Jada never expected. Government probes into celebrity-led charities and non-profits have started to take a closer look at the organizations the Smiths have supported over the years. While there is no direct evidence of illegal activity yet, the scrutiny alone is a sign of how much respect they have lost. When you lose the halo effect of being a beloved superstar, people start looking for the dirt you've been hiding. Financial advisors in Hollywood are reportedly advising their clients to distance themselves from the Smith brand to avoid being dragged down by the toxic association. This is a massive shift from 5 years ago when being seen with Will and Jada was a status symbol. Now, it's a risk. Vivica Fox's revelation also touches on the silent feud culture that Jada seems to thrive on. The story of her 17-year standoff with Gabrielle Union is just the tip of the iceberg. Sources claim that Jada has a long list of enemies in Hollywood, women she felt were too successful, too outspoken, or too close to Will. She operates like a queen bee who will sting anyone she perceives as a threat to her hive. This insecurity is what drove her to keep Will so isolated. By embarrassing him publicly, she made sure that other people would look at him with pity rather than admiration. She effectively destroyed his social standing so that he would have nowhere else to go but back to her. It is a classic tactic used by abusers to keep their victims dependent. She made the world laugh at him so that she could be the only one who understood him. And what about the legal fallout? While they haven't officially filed for divorce, the legal preparations happening behind the scenes are reportedly intense. Because they don't have a standard prenuptial agreement, the division of assets would be a nightmare. This is why Jada keeps saying she's not mature enough for divorce. It's not about maturity, it's about the money. She knows that a divorce would expose the true state of their finances and force her to walk away with far less than she currently has access to. She is staying in the marriage to maintain her lifestyle, all while treating Will like an unwanted guest in his own life. The hypocrisy is staggering. She wants the freedom of a single woman and the bank account of a married superstar. The public backlash has reached a point where even Jada's loyal fanbase is starting to question her. People are tired of hearing about her truth when her truth seems to change every time she has something to sell. They are tired of seeing Will look like he hasn't slept in 3 years. The fantasy illusion that Jada created is being dismantled piece by piece. Vivica Fox is simply the one brave enough to stand at the front of the line and say what everyone else is thinking. She is exposing the abuse of power that happens when a celebrity thinks they are untouchable. Jada thought she could control the narrative forever, but she forgot one thing. You can only push a man so far before he has nothing left to lose. As we look at the potential for hypothetical resignations from their own boards and the ongoing probes into their business dealings, the picture becomes clear. The Smith era of Hollywood dominance is over, and Jada Pinkett Smith is the one who pulled the trigger. She took a man who was the king of the world and turned him into a punchline. And as Vivica Fox continues to reveal the layers of this betrayal, we have to wonder, how much more can Will take? How much more of his legacy is he willing to burn to keep Jada happy? The answer might be more shocking than anyone realized. The story doesn't end with a slap or a book. It ends with the complete collapse of a dynasty built on lies. And as we transition into the final phase of this exposure, we will look at the ultimate consequence of Jada's actions. The permanent loss of the one thing she values more than money, her relevance. The industry is moving on. New stars are rising, and they are doing it with a level of authenticity that Jada can only pretend to have. The era of the red table is being replaced by a demand for real accountability, the kind that Jada is allergic to. Vivica Fox's truth is a wake-up call for everyone who thought Jada was the hero of this story. She isn't the hero, she's the cautionary tale. And as the investigations continue and more anonymous sources come forward to share their stories of her corruption and greed, the world will finally see the full extent of the damage she has caused. Will Smith may be the one who lost his career, but Jada Pinkett Smith is the one who lost her soul. The fallout is real, the consequences are coming, and there is nowhere left for her to hide. The industry is moving on and the era of the red table is being replaced by a demand for real accountability, which is the one thing Jada Pinkett Smith seems fundamentally incapable of providing. The final layer of this exposure involves the ultimate consequence of a life built on calculated manipulation and the permanent loss of the one thing she values more than money or power, and that is her relevance. As Vivica Fox continues to peel back the skin. On this Hollywood horror story, we see that the end game for Jada wasn't just to be famous but to be feared and respected as a spiritual authority. But you cannot be a spiritual authority when your primary legacy is the public destruction of the man who gave you everything. The reality of 2026 is that the Smith brand has become a cautionary tale for every high-profile couple in the world. We are seeing a massive shift in how the public consumes celebrity drama, and the consensus is that Jada's brand of performative vulnerability has reached its expiration date. The investigative findings into the final days of the Smith power dynamic reveal a man who is finally attempting to untangle himself from the web. Sources close to Will suggest that he has started to seek outside counsel not just for his legal affairs but for his mental health, away from the influence of Jada's handpicked advisors. For years, Jada allegedly controlled the flow of information to Will, making him believe that the entire world was against him and that she was his only true ally. This is a classic isolation tactic used to maintain control over a high-value asset. But the slap heard around the world changed the frequency. It forced Will to see that the world wasn't against him, they were pitying him. And for a man built on pride and success, being pitied is a fate worse than being hated. Vivica Fox has pointed out that the lack of accountability Jada showed after that incident was the final nail in the coffin. She didn't just fail to protect him, she actively distanced herself to preserve her own image as the innocent bystander. As the legal probes into their joint business ventures continue, the financial fallout is becoming impossible to ignore. There are hypothetical discussions within the industry about the total collapse of Westbrook Incorporated because major distributors no longer want to be in the Smith business. The brand has become synonymous with chaos and toxicity. Reports indicate that Jada's personal projects have seen a 90% drop in engagement because the audience has seen through the mask. You cannot sell a book about being worthy when the world has watched you treat your husband like he is worthless. The irony is that Jada's obsession with her own narrative is what eventually destroyed it. By constantly trying to redefine the truth, she made it so that no one believes anything she says anymore. The public reaction in early 2026 has transitioned from shock to a form of aggressive indifference. People are no longer clicking on the bombshell headlines because they know the formula. It is always a secret revealed to sell a product. It is always a confession used to distract from a scandal. Vivica Fox's decision to speak out has given permission to others in the industry to share their own experiences with Jada's manipulative nature. We are seeing a wave of anonymous stories from former co-stars and assistants who describe Jada as a woman who demanded absolute subservience. One source claimed that Jada would often remind people of her influence in the industry as a way to silence any criticism of her behavior. But that influence is gone. The gatekeepers of Hollywood have seen the damage she did to their biggest star, and they are closing the doors. The consequences for Jada are not just professional, they are deeply personal. The children who were once used as props in her quest for a modern family image are now grown and reportedly struggling with the reality of their upbringing. When you grow up in a house where your parents' marriage is a public performance and a psychological battlefield, it leaves scars. Leaked reports suggest that the family dynamic is fractured beyond repair, with the children seeking distance from the constant drama Jada creates. This is perhaps the greatest failure of the Jada Pinkett Smith experiment. She claimed to be building a new way of loving, but all she built was a new way of hurting. Vivica Fox's truth also highlights the hypocrisy of Jada's social activism. By using heavy causes as a shield for her own ego, she has done a disservice to the movement she claimed to support. When you call for an Oscar boycott only when it benefits your husband and then humiliate that same husband on a global stage, your credibility vanishes. The industry has noted this, and Jada is no longer invited to the tables where real change is discussed. She has been relegated to the world of low-tier podcasts and sensationalist headlines. The woman who wanted to be the queen of Hollywood is now the queen of a crumbling castle. And what of the future? Legal experts suggest that a formal separation of assets is inevitable as the financial pressure mounts. Will Smith is reportedly looking for a way to salvage what is left of his dignity and his bank account. He is a man who was pushed to the brink, and while the world may never fully forgive the slap, they are beginning to understand the monster that drove him to it. Jada, on the other hand, remains defiant. She continues to post cryptic messages about growth and light while her empire burns around her. She refuses to admit that she played any part in the destruction of her family or her husband's career. The investigative journey into this scandal concludes with a very clear picture of a parasitic relationship. Jada Pinkett Smith fed on Will Smith's fame, his money, and his soul until there was nothing left but a punchline. Vivica Fox's revelation is the final word on a decade of deception. It is the truth that Jada never intended for us to unlock. The fallout is massive, the corruption is deep, and the consequences are permanent. As we watch the final chapters of this marriage play out in the court of public opinion, it is clear that Jada has lost the game. She thought she could control the world by controlling Will, but in the end she lost both. This is the reality of the Smith marriage in 2026. A hollowed-out legacy, a broken man, and a woman who is still searching for validation in the wreckage she created. The industry probes will continue, the financial crises will deepen, and the public will move on to the next story. But the lesson of Jada Pinkett Smith will remain. You cannot build a life on the humiliation of others and expect to be honored. You cannot claim to be a healer while you are actively poisoning the people you love. Vivica Fox has shown us the truth, and now the world can finally stop pretending that Jada is the victim. The mask is off, the table is broken, and the truth is finally out. Will Smith might be down, but for the first time in a long time he might finally be free from the entanglement that destroyed him. As for Jada, she is left with exactly what she worked so hard to create: herself and the silence of a world that has finally stopped listening to her lies. The truth is finally on the table, and it is far more devastating than any scripted episode of a talk show could ever portray. Vivica Fox has opened a door that Jada Pinkett Smith spent millions of dollars trying to keep locked, and now that the light is shining and there is no going back, we have to ask ourselves, how many other Hollywood icons are living behind a similar wall of psychological manipulation and public deception? Is Will Smith the only victim of this kind of strategic emasculation, or is this the hidden cost of the Hollywood dream? Now it is your turn to weigh in on this absolute circus. Do you believe Will Smith can ever truly recover his legendary status after being broken down so publicly, or has the Jada effect permanently stained his legacy? Was Vivica Fox right to finally break the silence, or should Hollywood secrets stay buried? Drop your most honest thoughts in the comments below, because we are reading every single one of them. If you are tired of the fake narratives and ready for the raw, unfiltered truth behind the red carpet, then make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Turn on those notifications, because the investigation into the Smith Empire is deep, and we have more bombshells coming that you absolutely cannot afford to miss. Stay tuned as we continue to expose the reality behind the glitz and the glamour.